Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Dharma Helper, and this is my Season 1, Episode 1 and 2 review of Galavant. If you missed my Agent Carter live stream earlier last week, I'll put a link in the description down below for that. It's a little bit long because it's the first 2 episodes of Agent Carter that we're watching and reviewing at the same time. But I think it's worth it. I think we bring a lot of good points up, and I think it's a really good discussion. And if you're interested in that, check that out. If you're interested in my other reviews, I do Constantine, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, Scorpion, and Gotham, and I'll put those in the description of this video as well. So let's get down to the business of reviewing Galavant. And these first 2 episodes were really heavy on story, so I'll try to cover everything I can. The main story is about this super talented, brave knight named Galavant, sort of the typical knight in shining armor Galavant character. And he falls in love with a woman named Madalena, and she is kidnapped by the evil King Richard. And so his quest is to ride out and to rescue Madalena, but when he gets there, she chooses to marry the king instead of with Galavant. And that was the first kind of twist that they threw in, that sort of typical story of, you know, the knight in shining armor rescuing the maiden. That was the first twist that they threw into it. And then the second twist, years later, Galavant has fallen from his sort of stature as this knight of gallantry and chivalry and all this sort of stuff, and he's this drunkard, sort of washed out guy. And Madalena, on the other hand, has embraced her role as the evil queen. She's far more evil, actually, than the King Richard. And so that's kind of the second twist, is that this sweet maiden Madalena is more adept and more equipped at being an evil monarch than the one that eventually, you know, kidnapped her and brought her into it. And so, while Galavant is having his problems, Madalena and King Richard are having their problems. Their marriage isn't working out, and Madalena is, you know, sleeping around and all this stuff, and so King Richard is having to deal with the consequences of maybe a little bit of regret, seeping in terms of kidnapping her and forcing her to marry him. And so he really genuinely loves her, actually, but she has no affection for him, and so that's their conflict over these first couple of episodes. And then the final twist here is that out of admiration and respect and love for Madalena, King Richard has invaded this country called Valencia, and is seeking out this jewel of Valencia to give to his wife to buy her love, essentially. And so he overthrows the queen and king of Valencia and takes their lands and burns their crops and all this stuff. And the princess of Valencia, Princess Isabella something, is hiding, and so she sneaks out with the jewel and recruits Galavant to rescue the queen and king of Valencia and to liberate Valencia and to return the jewel to its people. And Galavant sees this as his quest to reclaim the love of Madalena, who he believes is regretful of, you know, choosing the king, and who really loves Galavant when that's not the case. And so the final twist, as I said, was that the king actually sent Isabella to go rouse Galavant from, you know, whatever hole he was hiding under, and to bring Galavant back so that the king could fight Galavant and prove his love to Madalena, who had been talking about, you know, Galavant wouldn't stand for this, or Galavant would do this, and all she's talking about for these first 2 episodes is Galavant. So the king gets the idea to bring Galavant to Valencia by lying about the queen and all this stuff, and then fight him, kill him, and win the love of the queen. And so those couple of twists that they threw in there for the story, for me, helped to keep it fresh and to give it its own identity, apart from the obvious sort of inspirations of Robin Hood Men in Tights or The Princess Bride or things like that. And they're still able to keep it in that same wheelhouse of humorous and along those lines, but that they were able to put their own twist on it and to keep things their own was a huge plus for me in these first 2 episodes. So that's basically the first episode, is setting up the idea that everyone has their own motivations and reasons and plans and machinations in place. And the second episode, Galavant, his squire Sid, and Isabella all go to a jousting tournament to try to, I think, win resources or money to kind of pay their way to Valencia. And that was their sort of episode, and they get, Galavant's rival, Sir John Hamm, played by John Stamos, and so they kind of play that up and have fun with that in a jousting tournament. And then on the other side of things, Richard and his sidekick, played by Vinnie Jones, try to toughen Richard up, King Richard, and butch him up a little bit to kind of continue to try to win the affections of the Queen, because he recognizes, that he's a little bit effeminate or kind of a wimpy, sissy sort of guy. And so his sidekick, Vinnie Jones' character, offers to teach him to fight and all this stuff. And so that's sort of his story for that second episode. It's a little bit lighter, as I said, than the first episode, but on its own, it kind of carries itself, and it's fun and entertaining to watch. And particularly that last musical number where they're talking about, you're not the worst thing ever, and how they did that double duet where Galavant and Isabella are on one side of the screen, and then Richard and Madalena are on the other side of the screen. I think that was very well done, and it telegraphs a little bit where those characters may be going or may end up. And so that's kind of the story for the first for the first 2 episodes. And so with that being out of the way, let's talk about the characters. And let's begin with Galavant. Galavant strikes me as kind of very similar to a lot of the male characters in this show, particularly Galavant and King Richard. They're both somewhat oblivious and somewhat sort of dim-witted, and they rely very heavily on their support. Like Sid is the support for Galavant, and then Vinnie Jones's character is the support for King Richard. So Galavant, to me, is, he's very naive. He's very oblivious, as I said. And he loves Madalena a lot. And he talks in the episode about how he fell very hard for Madalena and all this stuff, and how he never really got the idea for love. Rather, he spent his time, becoming a knight and training and reading books and learning about horseback and fighting and all this stuff. And so he became the best version of himself. And that was what we saw in his gallantry and his prowess with a blade and all this stuff. And so to me, I just hope that he doesn't become just a stereotype. I hope that there's a depth that we can see there that will come out over these 4 weeks. And we can see a depth of character there that's not sort of the stereotypical knight character. And it's obvious to me that the relationship there between him and Isabella is going to grow into a relationship that's a little bit romantic, and that hopefully he will see once he gets to Valencia that Madalena wasn't all that he had romanticized in his mind. That's his first love, and obviously that's a theme for him in the series, is that it's his first love, and he has a very hard time letting go of that. But hopefully we'll see him mature and grow and learn a little bit here as the series moves on. And I think a huge part of that is going to be his Squire Sid, who, like I said, is his sidekick, basically, character, who is straight man to his sort of goofy antics, and who I think we'll see a little bit more of in future episodes. I'm recording this review after I've seen the first 2 weeks of Galavant, and so I look forward to seeing more of Sid. I'll just leave it at that for now. Isabella, on the other hand, let's talk about her and how her lie of convincing Galavant to come to Valencia, I think, is going to eat at her over the course of these 4 episodes, these 4 weeks of Galavant. Is going to be, you know, how long can she keep that lie up? Will her opinion of Galavant change over the course of these 4 weeks? And will they ultimately end up together? I think that's going to be the case. I think, you know, things are going to happen, and they're going to develop a sort of relationship where her idea of this brutish, rude, sort of selfish character that she thinks Galavant is in these first 2 episodes is going to change, and she's going to come clean or confess, or maybe she won't confess, and they'll do that thing where she meant to confess, or she never got around to confessing, and then, you know, the king says, how could you have let her fool you, or why didn't you see this, or you know, obviously she was working for me, and thanks very much, Isabella. And so they'll have to work through that betrayal, Isabella and Galavant. But for now, again, I feel like she is going to end up eventually with Galavant. I think that's the trajectory that the story is going to go in. And it being only 4 weeks, there's only so many ways that they can take that story. So obviously that they're gonna have to do that sort of relationship. So that kind of covers my thoughts on Isabella. Let's talk about King Richard. King Richard is one of my favorite characters in that he is this horrible, terrible, mean, cruel guy, but he's also he's also, like Galavant, kind of an idiot, right? He's not very smart. He's not very observant. He's very cavalier about a lot of things that he says and a lot of things that he does. And I think over these 4 weeks, we're going to see him develop into more of an independent person, if that makes sense. Right now, he relies very heavily on Madalena's opinion of him. And I'd like to see a King Richard who relies on his opinion of himself, and who sees that, you know, he doesn't need the affections of this woman who is, you know, not very nice to him, and who has, like Galavant, romanticized this woman, and she's just not a very nice person to begin with. And so, like I said, Galavant and Richard have a lot more in common than they realize. And so, to see Richard, I think, over the course of these 4 weeks, try to win this affection of this woman, and then eventually realize that he doesn't need to, or he doesn't want to, or somebody else comes along. And so I think that's going to be his arc for this series, is, you know, becoming his own man and becoming his own king. And I think we're going to see Vinnie Jones's character play a huge role in that, much like Sid will play a huge role in Galavant's arc in his story. And Madalena, I think, is just going to end up by herself. I think eventually, you know, Galavant and King Richard are going to get that confrontation, and they're going to get that one-on-one, and they're going to say, wow, Madalena's a bit to deal with, isn't she? I mean, you know, if you want her, you can have her, brother. And then Galavant's going to be like, no. If you want her, you can have her. And so they're going to get together and compare notes here and realize that Madalena is kind of a terrible person. And for her, I think her arc, I hope, is not just going to be this one-dimensional sort of mean character. I hope her arc is, maybe she realizes how terrible she's been to King Richard, and maybe instead of King Richard and Galavant getting together and leaving her to rot, maybe she, realizes that King Richard ain't such a bad dude and connects with him in a way. But I don't think that's likely. I think that she's going to end up by herself. And she has nobody but herself to blame for that. It would be a shame in a storytelling aspect of it to have that character be so flat and predictable, but, that's whatever the case may be. And I think that covers my thoughts on characters. I talked about Galavant. I talked a little bit about Sid, who we'll see, I believe we'll see very much in the near future. I talked about Isabella. I talked about King Richard. I talked about Madalena. So let me round out my thoughts here and just cover my general thoughts on the episode and on the series moving forward. I enjoyed it very much. Very few television shows, very few movies actually get me to laugh out loud, and Galavant was able to do that. And the humor is very nice and very on point and sharp and witty in parts and juvenile in other parts, and they're able to walk that line and strike that balance very well. The big thing about Galavant is that it is a musical show, and the music... Man, if I'm not yawning, I'm coughing, I swear. Alright, so the music in Galavant is very good. A lot of the choreography is done very well, and again, particularly that last musical number is able to convey the tone and the idea of a scene very well, and I like that. And, I did a lot of music in school, musical theater and stuff like that in school. And so to see that on screen is kind of refreshing for me and kind of a throwback for me and very nostalgic. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it as well. I will say that, being that it's a 4-week show, that they've only got 4 weeks to tell a story here, I do have concerns that they won't be able to tell the full story or the story that makes the most sense or a story that is the most satisfying. They did cram a lot of exposition and a lot of story into that first episode, but the pacing of the second episode kind of balanced that out. So I don't know how well they're going to be able to communicate the arcs for these characters and the story for these characters in just a matter of 4 weeks. That's my biggest concern for the series. But other than that, I really thoroughly enjoyed the first 2 episodes. And I think the strength here, a theme with my reviews is talking about the ensemble cast. I talk a lot about the ensemble cast of Gotham. I talk about the ensemble cast of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Scorpion. And in Galavant, it's no different. Sid, Vinnie Jones's character, the chef in the Court of King Richard, the guest stars like John Stamos. These are all characters in the background. They're not the main characters, but they breathe life into the show. And they make the show interesting to watch, and they make the show all that much better for it. And so that was another strength that, logically speaking, I guess it makes sense that a musical sort of show would have a strong ensemble. That's a huge thing with musicals is the ensemble cast. So that's a huge strength and a huge plus for the show moving forward. I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about. One thing I will mention wrapping up here, as I said, I can kind of predict and guess where a lot of these stories are going to go. And I think that's a drawback of having only 4 episodes more than anything else, more than poor writing or anything like that. I don't think it's poor writing. I just think it's, you have a set amount of time to tell a story, so you have to be a little bit obvious or a little bit blatant with the arcs of these characters. So I think that covers everything that I wanted to talk about for Galavant for Season 1, Episode 1 and 2. If you enjoyed the episode, let me know in the comments section or hit me up on Twitter at the DH Reviews. If you have anything you want to mention, hit me up in the comments section or on Twitter. If you like this review, leave a thumbs up. It really spreads the channel out there and we can grow the channel. Speaking of growing the channel, subscribe if you haven't already and you'll see reviews like this as they come out. What you can look forward to this week, tomorrow, my Agent Carter Episode 3 review, and then on Thursday, my Galavant Episodes 3 and 4 review. And next week, things should be back to normal in terms of the schedule with Constantine coming back, Gotham coming back, Scorpion coming back. It's going to be a busy week next week, guys, but hopefully you guys will enjoy it. Subscribe if you're interested in any of those shows. And share this video. Get this video out there on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, wherever you got to get this video out there to grow the channel. Thanks very much for your patience and support these last few weeks as we've been getting back into the swing of things. And with all that being... Of course I'm going to cough during the outro. That makes the most sense, right? Wait for it. With all that being said, thanks very much for your support and your understanding during this very rocky return to the schedule. Things are going to get very busy next week, but hopefully that's going to be worth it. I'm very pumped for the return of Constantine, for example. So hopefully you guys are as well. With all that being said, that's been this review. I've been DH Reviews, and stay tuned.